I walked in with my...
I will call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for March 24th. We will stand for the pledge. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. McGill, will you call roll, please?
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Larimore Hall.
Here.
Burns. Here. Casebeer.
Here.
Connor.
Here.
Wiscombe.
Here.
Intern Torres Santos is not present.
Okay, do we have any changes to the agenda today? No. And I don't believe we have any written communications. So that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 1 minute on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the Commission. Anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, we will move to community service recognition. Ms. Zachary, would you like to introduce this?
Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission, Kathy Fry, our Associate Planner, will do the introduction for this month's recognition.
Thank you.
You. The Parks Division would like to recognize Miss Kelly Cruz for her work at the Douglas Family Preserve as a volunteer. Miss Cruz is everything you'd want in a volunteer. She is knowledgeable, she's reliable, and she's ready to tackle anything you ask her to do and anything she can find on her own, and she does that all with great enthusiasm. She came to the Parks Division in 2009 and offered her services as a volunteer. And during that time, in the fall and the winter of 2009, she helped weed a restoration area in the Douglas Family Preserve and learned the native plants in that area and the habitat that we had prepared there. And then in 2010, the Parks Division held a few restoration events in the park, and Miss Cruz was there to help supervise over 175 volunteers, help plant herself, weed some more, mulch, and anything else that needed to be done, and still continues to offer her services to us. So we would like to thank and recognize Miss Cruz and our other dedicated Douglas Family Preserve volunteers for the work they've done towards the restoration in the park.
Well, I am pleased to present this to you because, especially now when we are dependent on volunteers like you that are going to help us get the job done. We just really appreciate all the work you've done. The Douglas Family Preserve needs such love and attention that you've given it. So thank you very much, and please accept this certificate on behalf of the Commission and all of the citizens of Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can add a few words if you want.
I'm already blushing. Thanks, Kathy, very much. It's been a great opportunity. I love it there. So let's keep it going this year, and hopefully we'll have more volunteers out there to help me as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask a question. If anyone would like to volunteer, who would they call to set that up?
Chair Longstreet, members of the Commission, Commissioner Connor, I can always call the Parks Division. There are a number of numbers. Kathy Fry is the person who coordinates volunteers in a lot of the activities that we do at the Douglas Family Preserve, and her number is 897-1976. Also, our website is a great resource. You can go to the Parks Division. The Recreation Division also has volunteers, and a lot of our staff are on there, and that's often an easy way to sort of peruse opportunities as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for thinking of that, Ms. Connor. Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
And when we're talking about volunteer opportunities, would this also apply for community service hours for our high school students?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Casebeer, yes. In a number of instances, we have youth, and I think at our last 2 planting days, we did have some youth get some of their community volunteer hours. It's often helpful that they come organized with that information, and we're happy to work with anyone that wants to help kids get their community service hours.
Thank you.
Excellent. Good way to start the meeting. And now we move to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. Does anyone have anything to report? Ms. Wiscombe.
Excuse me, I have to dig it out. So don't panic. It's not quite as long as it looks. 2 committee reports. I had my second meeting with the Street Tree Advisory Committee. That was on Thursday, March 4th. And Mr. Downey gave a summary of the Brinkerhoff neighborhood meeting. The committee also expressed an interest in holding a special meeting to discuss recommendations for the street tree designation on Upper State Street. I don't believe a date has been set for this meeting at this time. And then we visited sites and made recommendations on street tree removal applications that are before the commission today. I also went to my very first Golf Advisory Committee meeting. That was on Wednesday, March 10th. And we heard the admin and staff reports. Of particular note, Mr. Mark Reed, who is here today, stated that they were just about to complete the last concrete pour for the cart paths, and so now we have contiguous cart paths at the golf course, which is really exciting. That should help with maintenance and also the number of golfers that can get through in a day. He also stated that the heavy equipment is now gone and the contractor was working on the punch list. So we're pretty much meeting the end of that, of the whole project. Mr. Chris Tellerico said that they had a great response to a mixer that they had put together, but it was rained out, so it's now rescheduled. But it looks like there may be more of those types of events if the response continues. And Mr. Mario Medina said he has had one of the best winters in a long time at Mulligan's, which is exciting. He had a very slow summer, but the winter has been great there. We reviewed the rounds of golf year to date, and they're off. I think part of it's due to the construction project. So the committee discussed some ways to increase rounds, and they also agreed to hold a special meeting, which I believe is scheduled for Wednesday, April 7th at 3:30. And that meeting will be to hear the golf budget proposals that will go before council, and also brainstorm some ways that we may get the number of rounds increased at the golf course. And just on another note, the Executive Women's Group is holding their annual membership drive on March 20th, and they hope to attract a lot of new members to that group, which would also help at Muni. That's it.
Excellent. Mr. Burns, did you have?
Yeah, just moving right along. I was at the Park Foundation meeting last week. One of the things the Park Foundation is doing is we're putting together a thank you for the members of the Park Foundation that have donated over $100, and the thank you will be on the Condor Express on April 23rd, about 5 till 7 p.m. If people are interested in attending, I think if you were to call the Park and Recreation Office, you'll be able to get information on that, and we're getting some publicity out as a thank you for our members. What the Park Foundation is doing is trying to raise scholarships for what's called the Safe Summer for Kids, which is a park and recreation program that, with our limited budget, we're trying to, for the city budget, we're trying to help support with the Park Foundation. Another advisory committee I'm on as a liaison is the Arts and Craft Advisory Committee. At the last meeting about a week ago, it was decided that they would come up with some suggestions to help the arts and crafts show be more efficient, so possibly it would not cost the city as much. They realize they're not a very big part financially of the city, but from a social perspective, it's a very big part for the community, but they also want to help how they can with the budget problems we're having. So that's my report.
Rocca, do you?
It's not a liaison report, but I did want to say that I had a random but nice opportunity to attend the State of the City breakfast a couple of weeks ago. I thought the mayor did a very good job. The mayor and city staff did a very good job in presenting the work that the city does and putting it in the context of the current budget crisis. One of the things, sort of takeaway from it, though, and that was good to hear, is that even sort of the city, when the city presents the work that it does and presents itself to the community, in this case specifically the business community, the work that the Parks Department does, not only in the sort of obvious stuff of keeping our parks beautiful and well maintained, but the services that we provide for young people, the alternatives that we provide that keep kids active and busy and out of trouble, as well as some of the workforce development stuff or the work skill development programs that we've been working with other city agencies to develop. We're also highlighted. So, I think that we can be very proud that and to know sort of objectively when the city's out sort of stumping and talking about what it does and how important its work is, that our work is front and center.
Thank you. Ms. Connor?
Yes, I attended the Teen Council meeting, and I wanted to let you know that in April there will be a Yes Fair that's taking place, as well as a Youth Speak Out. And unfortunately, I didn't bring my BlackBerry in, so I can't tell you exactly the days. However, you can reach Susan Young at 564-5418, and you can be transferred to her for that information. As well, the Teen Council is going to be recruiting new members for the upcoming year. And if anyone's listening out there that would like to be on the Teen Council, please call that number as well. And we hope we get some nice new recruits. Thank you.
Mr. Casey.
Yes, in the last month I've attended 2 meetings. One was the Lower West Side Advisory Council, and this is a group of dedicated citizens concerned about the Lower West Side. And right now it seems like there are 2 other advisory councils, one for the Franklin Center and one for the West Side. And there are talks going on about combining these 3 advisory councils because they have so many issues in common. Why have 3 separate organizations running around doing the same thing? So we're working on collaborating together. And Nancy Rapp made a presentation on the state of the Parks and Recreation budget so that people can plan and so that there won't be surprises because we are facing cuts. On a positive note, the Easter egg hunt, the annual Lower West Side Easter egg hunt is going to happen on Saturday, April 3rd. And we're doing a little fundraising. If anyone would like to help us support the Lower West Side Easter egg hunt, the Park Foundation will be receiving donations. The other meeting that I attended was the Integrated Pest Management. And this meeting happens 4 times a year, and this is a group of professionals that are dedicated to minimizing the use of toxic chemicals in our landscape, in our parks. And at this meeting, they finalized their annual report, which Park Manager Santos Escobar will be presenting in greater detail later in this meeting. And that is my report.
Thank you. Well, I attended the city administrators meeting of advisory group chairs and vice chairs. The department hosted it, Nancy Rapp did a presentation on the services provided by Parks and Recreation. It was a good meeting. Of course, the budget was front and center, and everyone is concerned, all departments. So it was a very good meeting. There was a lot more give and take at this one than we've had in the past. So we all came away feeling like we'd made some progress in those areas. Mr. Burns and I attended Front Country Trails. That group is still working hard on the issues facing the trails, and now that they've hired a staff person part-time, I think things are moving forward, and maybe a little out of the so much pressure on the 3 agency staff, and hopefully be able to transfer some of the duties over to the staff person hired. And I also stopped by Plan Santa Barbara at the library last week on the 18th. I think everyone has their packets here. We will be meeting jointly with the Planning Commission next month, I believe it is, to give our input on Plan Santa Barbara. I encourage everyone to really think deeply on where we want to go in the future and what we think is important. Probably one of the hottest topics is going to be how much parkland we need as we look at density and how we get it and maintain it. So we may want to start advocating for a formula for that, but there's some models out there, and I think we see those in our Parks and Recreation magazines every so often. So I'd encourage everybody to really spend a little time before that meeting and think about what we want the future to look like. So that is all that I have. It brings us to Commission and Staff Communications. Ms. Zachary, do you have anything? Okay. And our Youth Council report is tabled since our intern is not here. Consent calendar. The summary of council actions. Was there anything that anyone wanted further information or comment on? It was nice to see that our new ordinance regarding our youth member was adopted, and we are ready to move forward with that for the next recruitment. Okay. Well, that brings us to the approval of minutes. We have minutes for February 24th.
I move the minutes be approved as submitted.
And second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations. We have 3 trees this month. We'll wait a minute for Mr. Downey.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the first item on our agenda would be 522 Garden Street. The existing tree is a pretty nice pink flame tree. The project is redeveloping, and the proposal puts the driveway right through the center of the trunk of this tree. That is partially due to parking requirements for the project, and the Street Tree Advisory Committee is recommending a conditional approval on the condition that 2 24-inch box minimum size of this same tree are planted along the parkway at location to be determined by park staff.
I did have a question. We have a speaker, but I have a question first. And I looked at the plans, and I looked, is there room? You've determined there's room for a second tree in that area?
Chair Longstreet, and Commissioners, the parkway is large enough for 2 of this type of tree. It's not a really broad tree. It might be just a little tight, and I think if we leave a little room for leeway, maybe I might recommend up to 2 recommendation.
I just as when I was going by and looking at it, was my concern. We do have a public speaker for this, Chris Gilliland.
I'm Chris Gilliland. I'm the landscape architect for this project. And as Tim said, we're removing that tree because of the mixed-use project going in and the location. Let's see. The architect is here also, and he was going to speak on this as well. But we feel that 2 trees would be kind of pushing it. We do have 1 additional tree just inside within the green space, and if we add a second tree in front of that, the canopy will conflict there. So we're hoping, we obviously would like to remove this tree, but we'd like to keep 1 tree replacement on this project if possible, and that would go in front of the structure. I think that's mainly it, but yeah. So we're hoping for just 1 instead of 2.
Thank you. Ryan Mills.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm just going to reiterate that on this project, it is a fairly narrow lot, and currently just flanking both corners of the property are fairly large, I believe, Elm Street trees right adjacent to our property. So right now, the 1 tree equally spaced in the middle leaves about 30 feet or so, maybe less, between each of the canopy or each of the trunks. So 2 things. 1, the 2 we were kind of opposed to just because we are providing 2 trees, and 1 is in the potential second location in the parkway, just set back about 5 to 10 feet is what we're proposing. So we kind of feel if we do the 2 street trees, we would most likely remove the second canopy tree we were proposing in the parkway, or I'm sorry, in our little green open space. So, so we're asking for 1 for 1.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Questions? Mr. Burns.
Yeah, I'm this is more of a kind of a comment than a question. From the perspective that I used to, for about 15 years, work in the building, one of the adjacent buildings here, and I've known this property for a long time. Looking at it, looking at the plans that we have, it seems that if they had flipped the building, just looking at it, they could have had a driveway where there's not an existing tree, and we could have saved a tree. My feeling is that whoever bought this property, and I'm really not sure, knew this tree was in place. I don't, just because we get a set of plans that say we're going to build a new building and 1 tree has to be removed and we'll put in new trees, it's bothersome that it looks like that's what we're planning to do, and then we get homeowners that say we just want to have a tree that's got a problem, and we're telling them, no, we can't cut down that tree. Maybe there's things that I don't know, but it seems that if they had moved, they could have designed around the existing tree, and maybe that's not feasible because this space is too small, but it's just it seems awkward that the first thing that goes is a very nice mature tree. Just a comment, and maybe the architect, if possible, can explain why having this building flipped wasn't going to work. Thank you.
That comment came up pretty quick with ABR. So ABR was on your side on that one, so we kind of worked through them. And originally, the parcel is a very small stamp-sized parcel. It's about 3,200 square feet. So we studied pretty much every which way we can make this unit. ABR actually pushed us for more density, believe it or not. But the size of the lot and the nature that it was 2 units, 1 being commercial, our parking standards now were pushed so high we were basically required the 3 spots if we were going to have any parking. So we studied it every which way, and for the parcel overall, to push up against that big blank wall of art from scrap was really the most useful way to utilize the design on that property and to open up against our other neighbor, to capture views, to use the lot to its best advantage. We weren't blocking or shading any neighbors that way. So we looked at it many different ways, and ABR really did work with us on that a few times. So that's where we ended up where we did.
No, that's a good response. It's good to understand why you got there. It helps. Any other questions of staff or applicant? I would be in favor of the up to 2 in the motion, just because going on, by on that street, it seemed like it was going to be tight to have add another street tree. I didn't exactly see where that was going to go, so I would, at this point, if we have no other discussion, entertain a motion.
Yes, I would make a motion that the commission approve the removal request on the condition that the applicant install up to 2 24-inch pink flame trees at locations in the parkway to be determined by park staff.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I think that addresses the issues, and you'll work through that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Downey, our next item, Harborview.
Here along Street, 1455 Harborview Drive is older neighborhood with unimproved parkways. The street ends at a curb, and then the properties exist after that. This tree is located right adjacent to the curb. And the Street Tree Advisory Committee determined that there's still a few good years for this tree, and that the reasons for removal didn't justify the removal. Their recommendation and staff's recommendation is that this removal be denied.
Questions of? I was a little confused when I went out to the site. It looked like it was on the 451 property, not the 455.
Chair Long Street, the tree somewhat straddles both properties. It's right there at the property line.
Okay.
I actually got to the property and met the owner at 1451 with his wife and a child and an infant. And I guess the concern they had is where the concrete curb is, it's tipping up 5 or 6, maybe 3 or 4 inches right at the tree. Are we at the city planning to kind of correct that, or is that not really in our finances? Thank you.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Burns, the defect has been passed on to the Streets Division for their implementation of repairs. I do not have a time frame when that would occur.
Any other questions or comments? Motion?
Yes, I would be happy to make a motion that the commission deny the removal request of the California pepper at 1455 Harborview Drive.
Second.
Yeah. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Our last tree item, 709 Wentworth.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, 709 Wentworth Avenue is a stone pine that was kept in place when they constructed the sidewalks. Sidewalks were built around the tree. In fact, the spaces that were provided for street trees is quite different than this location. The applicant is stating problems with cracked sidewalk and potential damage to his stone wall. The damage to the sidewalk is not even large enough yet to act on, and the Street Tree Advisory Committee determined that the reasons that were stated were not sufficient to justify removal at this time. Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff recommend that this tree be denied.
Questions or discussion? Motion?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You're in the role.
Okay. Yes, I'd make a motion that the commission deny the removal of the Italian stone pine at 709 Wentworth Avenue.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that concludes our street tree issues, and now we're to old business, park tour update.
Chair Longstreet and members of the commission, we just want to give you a brief update. You have a tour scheduled for this Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. We've been working on the itinerary, so I wanted to share that with you briefly. We will be boarding the Parks and Recreation bus at 620 Laguna Street and taking a driving tour of Santa Barbara's parks and recreation facilities. Not all 54 of them, because we only have 2 hours. However, we've crafted a route that will take us through the downtown, Upper State Street, Las Positas Valley, Hidden Valley, the Mesa, the coast areas, our beach parks, and then through the east side. And we will be narrating the tour. You can imagine you're in a new city and you're trying to find your way around and talking about the various aspects of the parks and or recreation facilities, who uses them, how long they've been there, the key features, that kind of thing. Areas that we won't be able to get to, partly because we don't have that much time and partly because it is a bus and it can't go up to the Riviera and to Franceschi and Parma Park. But keep in mind when you look at your park map that if you want a subsequent tour in a slightly different vehicle, we'll add those on in the future. We've invited mayor and council to the tour, and we have a number of them that have confirmed they will attend, so it'll be a great opportunity to meet and greet with some of our new council members as well as our mayor. So we're looking forward to it, and we'll see you there. Happy to answer any questions you might have, too. Oh, and we promise we'll be back by 4.
Okay.
Ms. Zachary, I would encourage you to maybe when we come down off of the Mesa, come down Cliff Drive, turn left on Rancheria Street and just zip up. It's just 2 blocks up to Parque de los Niños. And because this is an area, this neighborhood, the Lower West Side, that needs our attention. And there may be some opportunities for acquiring new parklands in this neighborhood. So I would like, especially if the city council is present, to be able to pass this information along to them.
Thank you.
Ms. Zachary, you may bring it up at the tour, but what's the status on Shoreline Park where we've had to put up the fencing by the bathroom?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Burns, we'd be happy to bring back a more detailed presentation on the status, but very briefly, we are on the cusp of submitting a permit for a coastal development permit application, because in order to reinstall any fencing or sidewalk, because the park's in the coastal zone, we need a permit for that. And it's not a fully funded project, but we're working on that too.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I look forward to seeing you all on Friday at 2 o'clock. So new business. We have our forestry program report, part 1. This is like a sequel. Is it in 3D?
Chair Longstreet, members of the commission, if you recall, we've been talking about doing a work session on our forestry program. The commission had the opportunity to have special work sessions on our parks programs. Some of our new commissioners weren't on the commission at that time, so we can certainly catch you up on those details as well. And then also discussions about recreation, partly related to who we are and what we do, but also in lieu of the budget challenges that we face. Instead of setting aside another meeting, more hours, a separate day, we propose that we give you presentations on the forestry program over 3 meetings. And tonight's presentation, or this afternoon's presentation, is really sort of the nuts and bolts of the forestry program. Hopefully we'll ground everybody in who we are and what we do. The next one we'd like to present to you are tree inventory and assessment work that we've been doing. And we'll actually have a separate standalone report on that effort, some of which has been funded by a grant. And then the third meeting really delve into the questions that we always ask about our urban forest and developing a long-range management plan. What are the key issues that we face, management issues we face today? What do we expect to face in the next 20 or 30 years? And how do we set in motion new policies so that we have the urban forest that we want in the next 30 years? Tim Downey's going to do the presentation. I'm also available, as is Santos Escobar, to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. I would just like to say, as long as I've been around reading the report, I learned a lot. I mean, it refreshed things and it was very good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, we're going to start off. This is the forestry mission statement. We have a mission in the forestry program to plant and maintain city, street, park, and facility trees for the benefit of the residents and to ensure a safe and healthy urban forest. We have a number of documents that help guide our policies in the department. The Street Tree Master Plan that was adopted by City Council in 1977 provides guidance in the management of the city's diverse street tree population. The most active part of this plan is the street tree designation, which this commission frequently makes changes to the designated street trees for various streets. Chapter 1520 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code relates to the maintenance of city-owned trees. It sets the policies that guide how we deal with those trees and the review processes for that. Chapter 1524 is our tree preservation ordinance. It deals with the preservation of privately owned city-regulated trees. It spells out how the trees are regulated and the processes for review. Public review and policy making is done by these various agencies related to trees. Street Tree Advisory Committee reviews removal applications and advises the Park and Recreation Commission on those removal requests, as well as staff. And they also deal with the street tree designations I mentioned before. The Park and Recreation Commission, this commission, they act on those removal requests. For most private tree applications in the setback and city trees and changes to the Street Tree Master Plan. The Historic Landmark Commission and Architectural Board of Review are subcommittees of the Planning Commission. They review various landscape plans for projects that occur throughout the city in their various areas of expertise. And by reviewing those landscape plans and approving those plans, they have a strong influence on the number of trees that are planted throughout the city as well. City Council is the last stop as far as policy making is concerned. They set policy through the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, any change to that. An example of that is the recent changes in December for the tree preservation ordinance. They dictate and approve the general plan. Trees are a big part in that general plan. They develop resolutions, and they are the final review for appeals of any boards or commissions related to any issue in addition to trees. Forestry staff, urban forest superintendent, aka city arborist. I do a lot of the administrative stuff that deals with developing and implementing and supervising the forestry program. Provide expert tree opinions when they're needed for tree issues. And I'm the staff liaison for the Street Tree Advisory Committee, and I provide their recommendations and reports to this commission. The supervisor inspects trees, schedules the day-to-day operations of staff and contractors, supervises staff, and works with other departments and on tree-related projects. The field crew consists of 2 senior tree trimmers. They are directly involved in the in-field setup and work of the crews in trimming and removing trees. They also participate in those activities. They work in conjunction with the tree trimmers to achieve that. The tree trimmers do the trimming and the removal of various trees around the city. The tree care specialist is a very important position for us. He plants trees, waters trees, provides support systems like staking for the trees, provides training, pruning for the trees to develop them into a tree that will work in their unique positions throughout the city. And he works with the grounds maintenance worker and the part-time hourly help to achieve that. The grounds maintenance worker is primarily responsible for watering trees and assisting other forestry staff where needed. And part-time hourly, when we have funds to hire additional help, he also provides support primarily to the tree care specialist, but at times the other tree staff as well. We also have administrative support that is part-time that helps provide documents and the minutes for the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Mr. Downey, this is, in the report it said we had a 30% reduction. We used to run 3 full tree trimming crews, isn't that correct?
Chair, that's correct.
So that's where our reduction was taken, was in this. Okay. Thanks. I just want to make sure we're all aware of where we were reduced.
This is what we maintain. We have 33,193 street trees. We have a pruning goal of 5,100 trees per year. We have a planting goal of 300 trees per year. And the young tree care that I described earlier, it occurs over the first 3 to 5 years of the tree's life. The other thing that our staff does is coordinate with other departments and divisions on their projects that relate to our city trees, and we also coordinate with Edison on their line clearance work. And a little bit later, I'll talk about how we fund this work briefly. Park and facility trees, we have over 9,000 in our inventory. That is achieved through general pruning of the trees. Each year we set a schedule of which trees we'll prune and how we'll prune them. We generally do not plant a lot of new trees within the parks. Permitting and enforcement. The department processes 80 to 120 applications for either tree removals or pruning of street trees, and most of those, 85%, are for removal of either street trees or setback trees, which this board reviews. Enforcement in fiscal year 2009, we had 63 reported violations. Staffing investigates the reported violations. The municipal code processes the confirmed violations, and meets with the violators to come up with various mitigations to mitigate the violations. Majority of those violations have occurred at setback prunings or removals. As you see in the slide, the title, the Chapter 15 items I directly enforce, and a portion of the Chapter 22 violations I directly enforce, but I also provide expert help to other divisions that have tree violations. Land development review. As I stated before, the various boards and commissions review these land development opportunities. The Architectural Board of Review reviews reports and recommendations related to trees within projects anywhere in the city, with the exception of those in El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District and Brinkhoff Landmark District. Those are reviewed by the Historic Landmark Commission. Those are primarily commercial ventures. When the project involves street, trees, and sidewalk improvements that relate to our city street trees, those items come before this board. The Forestry Division is involved in a number of community programs, the first of those being Arbor Day. Arbor Day was designated by proclamation of the City Council on March 7th of 2010 this year. The Forestry Division works with Santa Barbara Beautiful and various local schools to plant trees at those schools as an Arbor Day celebration. The 5th grade classes are involved in each of the schools, and one of the schools actually has a bigger program that involves the majority of the school, where we plant trees at that school, and there's a little bigger program. In addition to that, forestry works with various community groups to have tree plantings throughout the communities. Most of those have occurred over on the east side and the west side as a community volunteer day where people can come and clean up the neighborhood, plant trees, clean up graffiti and whatnot. We also just recently had an outreach with a specific neighborhood. We had a citizen that wanted to see some additional trees in their area, and we worked with them to get those trees planted. Forestry staff's involvement in those is to prepare the holes and work with the volunteers to get the trees planted. City forestry program works with Santa Barbara Beautiful in a couple of different ways. The aforementioned Arbor Day planting. I will get in a little more detail with Santa Barbara Beautiful in a minute here about how in funding what all things they fund for us, but we work with them on their commemorative tree plaque program. They provide a service that people can commemorate their loved ones and place those at our street trees. Our staff installs those. Tree City USA is something that I'm extremely proud of. Tree City USA is run by the National Arbor Day Foundation, and they recognize groups that achieve in 4 different areas. If they have a budget of $2 per capita for their tree program, they have a tree preservation board or ordinance. They have a group, a department that's responsible for the maintenance of those trees, and a proclamation and Arbor Day celebration for Arbor Day. If a community achieves that and they apply to the National Arbor Day Foundation or to the State Forester, they can get recognition as Tree City USA. The city of Santa Barbara just received their 30th consecutive year of Tree City USA. Forestry program funding. The bulk of our funding comes from user utility tax. This is a tax that is paid for use of various utilities like water and sewer and natural gas and electric. That funding must be used along our streets and roads. So our street tree program, the maintenance for our street trees, is funded by this user utility tax. So all our street tree work is done based on the monies we receive for this. The forestry program is also funded partially by the general fund. General fund is where we've had our biggest cuts in recent past. Since the park and facility trees are not located in the street road right-of-way, they have to be funded differently, and that's what the general fund funds for our program. So when you see forestry cuts to the general fund cuts, you're seeing those losses on our parks and facilities. Santa Barbara Beautiful also provides some money to support the forestry program. They fund not only the purchase of all the trees that we plant, but they also provide a small amount of money that goes to partially fund the small tree care program. And when the city forestry program has special projects, we can submit those to them for potential funding as well. We're always looking at those opportunities where we can find that extra funding, and historically these are significant funding sources. With that, I will entertain questions or comments, and very pleased to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Downey? Ms. Wiscombe.
Yes, thank you, Chair Longstreet. I have a couple questions, Mr. Downey, and a couple comments. First of all, the street tree master plan, I realize it's a fluid document. Is there a place where public can actually view a document that shows what gets planted on what street? Or how is that organized?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the street tree designation list is a rather fluid document. We make regular changes to that at this commission. At this time, we do not have it as an available document because it changes so often. Anytime anybody has a question as to what a designation is for a particular area, they can call the Parks office at 564-5433, and we'll be happy to advise them of what the designation is.
Okay, thank you. I just have two more things. With respect to enforcement, your presentation talked about the greatest number of violations is in the setback areas, or setback trees. Is there a handout that the public can get regarding exactly defining the setback areas? I realize it's defined in the municipal code, but I'm wondering if there's a way to educate the public on exactly what the setback area is and maybe avoid some of these these violations.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the setback information is actually two documents. One is a map that dictates what their particular zoning is for their property. And the second is a diagram or in the municipal code it states, depending on what the zoning is, how far that distance is for the property. The zoning page on the city's website has information related to both of those items.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking of a way to educate the public on exactly, what their setback area might be in their zone, so they know what they can trim, what they can remove, what they can't, that type of thing. So, and my third comment relates to the report that the commission was given. There are 3,463 available sites for tree plantings. That's I think what your report said. And I'm just wondering, can we have more volunteer planting days when we can, maybe make this a goal to, I think the report stated that about over 30% of the trees that were planted on vacant sites during last year were accomplished by the volunteer planting days. And it just seems that maybe putting together some sort of a program where, we can tackle some more of this would be a great community involvement.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Wiscombe, earlier when I was talking about our goals, there was a planting goal of 300 trees. That goal is based on the estimate that we remove about 150. So we're actively working through that goal to take care of those events. We also would be happy to look at requests for additional volunteer opportunities to plant additional trees, depending on our resources available at the time.
One thing back to what Ms. Wiscombe was talking about with the enforcement issues. Wasn't there some publication and some outreach done to the tree companies when we went through that very long, drawn-out process to come up with the fines? And I think we established at that point the best way to get info out. The trees we were concerned about were ones that were mostly going to be done by professionals. So,
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, we did have a number of opportunities for them to come to various boards and commissions and comment on those items. There were specific invitations that went out for the first one we had that went to tree care companies local to Santa Barbara. In addition, and in a future presentation, you'll see our efforts to provide some additional education to those professionals regarding the municipal code.
Thank you.
Chair Longstreet, if I could just add a little bit to what Mr. Downey said. First of all, we intend to implement a broader education effort related to setback trees for both tree care professionals and for homeowners. There's a whole additional segment of the population that work on trees that we may not capture, so we're trying to capture that as well. And that's something that we identified through the regulatory update process that we did. We do have 2 handouts in our Parks Division office that we can give people and information on our website. And as Mr. Downey said, when we talk about our community and outreach efforts at a part 2 or part 3, part 2 of the presentation, you'll get more information about what we have and what we think we need. As far as the volunteer planting opportunities, first of all, we know we have over 3,000 sites because we actually counted them 2 years ago. So one of the things you'll hear more about next month is the results of our inventory. So we finally actually have a number that's up to date. we have talked about really to be successful in capturing all of those sites, we would actively have to manage neighbors into maintaining those young trees. We have one staff person essentially that cares for young trees, and our goal is to care for them for 3 years, and then they're on their own. Because we have to move on to, we keep adding trees. So every year we sort of let loose a couple of trees, say you're on your own, and then we add more. So it would take some really active engagement and participation on the part of residents. And certainly there have been some. I got trained in how to water my street tree when I moved to a new place, so hopefully I helped it along a little bit. And part of what we'll present to you in the next couple of months is a community tree guide that we're working on, which will be a physical handout, although we're trying to get away from generating too much paper, but it'll be on our website, that will help people as a go-to reference. It won't be the end-all, be-all, and end-all because there's so much out there, but it will help people answer some of those questions. And that's work that is being funded by the grant that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So stay tuned. There's more coming.
Yeah. Mr. Casey.
On another note, I'm curious about the forestry program funding, the utility user tax, and how that's determined, if that's a fixed allocation, or does somebody higher up get to jiggle with those allocations?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Casebeer, the city receives, and don't quote me on this because I didn't actually bring the numbers, in excess of $2 million, a utility user tax that's dedicated to the streets. Now, I believe it's more than that. It gets established through the finance department. And some of the funds go to maintaining the streets and the sidewalks. So the funding that comes in from that tax also goes to the Public Works Department. And there's a certain amount set aside for trees. In the case of this year, it's about $960,000, and we expect that funding to remain the same in fiscal year 11. It represents about 80% of the budget. So when you think about it, we have about $260,000 of general fund money. And in this last year, with the furlough reductions and additional reductions, that actually, I think we had, and again, I didn't bring my numbers, I apologize, on the order of about $150,000 for street, park, and facility trees this year. So it's significantly less than what we have for street trees. However, street trees require much more management than park trees do. So it's a different level of management that we employ there.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Very informative report. Very good. The numbers are really astounding. The number of trees that we have and the number of species of trees and everything. So that was great. Thank you very much. Mr. Casebeer.
Just have one other question. Could you quantify what an average cost of plant material for a new street tree? If we're talking about 3,000 potential trees, how much would it cost to just the plant of the tree itself?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Casebeer, the question is more complex than your, but to give you a synopsis, first of all, Santa Barbara Beautiful does fund the purchase of our trees up to a limit. They budget a certain amount. So if we need to purchase more trees than that, it would require us to request additional funds for them or find some other source of funding for that. In addition to that, there's staff time involved in prepping the site, looking for location, making sure the exact location of the parkway is appropriate, digging the hole, planting the tree, watering the tree, maintaining the stakes and ties. So it really would have to be calculated out. I couldn't give you an exact amount at this meeting.
So it's the Parks and Recreation budget is for maintaining these new trees is mainly the labor in planting and maintaining these new trees rather than the plant material.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that It was a good report. We look forward to part 2. And now that brings us to integrated pest management, the annual report. And a changing of the guard all the way around. Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Welcome, Ms. Rapp.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi.
Well, good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Santos Escobar. I'm the city's parks manager and also the city's IPM coordinator. And today I'm here to present the Integrated Pest Management, also known as IPM 2009 Annual Report. This report is a citywide report, not just a Parks Division report. So everybody is aware of that. We're in our 6th year of reporting to Commission and also the Airport Commission, and we'll also be going to Council as well. And I'd like to start off by thanking our Citizens Advisory Board, consisting of Mr. Greg Chittick, Mrs. Kristen Labonte, Mr. Oscar Carmona, and Mr. Corey Wells for all the time spent with helping our whole city stay on track in regards to minimizing pesticides and doing the right thing. Regarding the report itself, we also have department-wide IPM coordinators as well. And at this time, I'd like to thank Mr. Jeff McKee with the airport, Mr. Jim Dewey with Public Works, Mr. Jed Conley with the waterfront, Mr. Joe Poirier with the fire department, Mrs. Michelle DeCant with community development. They play a great role in providing the numbers that you see before you in your report. Also, division-wide, I'd also like to thank Mr. Mark Reed with the golf course, Mr. George Johnson with Creeks, and also park staff, Mr. Ken Brown, Mr. Mark Roush, and Mr. Steve Takai, because as you can tell in the report, it takes a lot of work hours in order to compile the report as a whole. Integrated Pest Management, also known commonly as IPM, is an effective environmental sensitive decision-making system of pest management, and the goal is to minimize health, environmental, and financial risks. In January 2004, the City Council adopted what is known as the IPM strategy. It promotes the use of non-hazardous and reduced risk alternatives that are protective of human health and the environment overall. It reduces and eliminates the use of pesticides, products that pose known, likely, or probable human health or environmental risks. In February 2006, the Pesticide Hazard and Exposure Reduction Model, also known as FAIR, assigned green, yellow, or special circumstance red zones and allowed the use of carefully screened materials by zone designation. The Parks Division, in regards to all our parks, 98% is green, 10% is yellow. And regarding all of the other facilities and such, with Public Works is 100% green. Regarding the golf course, the greens are red, and the majority of the rest of the golf course is considered green. At the airport, it's also the same thing. Within the fenced area, it is considered yellow, and outside of that, where the public can get into, it's considered green. And the medians along the airport, they're considered yellow as well. Just so everybody realizes, too, in regards to green zones are an area of high exposure potential, and only pesticides that are green, which show very limited human environment impacts, can be used. Some of the examples, just so you realize what I'm talking about, is we could have clove oil, we could have other food products that are citrus-based that are used for controlling weeds. We also use what's known as BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis, to control mosquitoes. And so those are green products. When we talk about yellow zones are areas with less potential for harmful exposure And there's a broader range of yellow materials that are used, and one of the main yellow materials that it's used is glyphosate, also known as Roundup. And other items are for controlling mosquitoes is a material called Alticid. Red zones are special circumstance areas, and in regards to red zones, the red zones are at the golf course, once again on the greens, because hopefully everybody realizes that greens are very expensive, and each green can range from $45,000 to $65,000 to rebuild if they die. So, citywide highlights. The total units of pesticides applied did increase this past year from 1,132 in 08 to 2,369 in 09. However, as you'll realize, the units of green material increased from 239 to 559. The units of yellow material increased from 867 to 1,133.4. And then the units materials increased from 25 to 676. And also the numbers of times that pesticides were applied increased from 160 to 211. Overall, 52% of the materials applied was to control mosquitoes, and the majority of that control was at the Goleta Slough. And here's a chart that just goes and shows exactly where we were at in 2004. Lots of red material being used and going all the way to 209, where the red reduced and such, and the green has stayed pretty steady from 206 to 209, and the yellow has gone up a little as well. But the majority of the use is for protecting human health.
We have a question here.
Yeah. I'm sorry, can I just ask a question about the previous slide?
Sure.
What's with the pink?
The pink, our red got off a little.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
So that's red?
That is red.
Okay.
So I apologize on that.
That maybe you had red light.
No. That was a hard one this year. So the airport department highlights the use of pesticides increased from 996 to 2,262. The units of green material increased from 179 to 517 units. Units of yellow material increased from 816 to 1,121. The units of red material increased from 0.75 to 623. The airport, however, did spend over 14,000 hours performing alternative pest management work, and a lot of that is hand weeding, gopher control, and such. I do want to go back and just let you know in regards to the green materials, the reasons why the numbers went up was for controlling mosquitoes at the slough, and the majority of that material used was BTI again. Once again, at the yellow materials at the airport was up because the green materials didn't work as well to control the mosquitoes, so Alticid, which is a yellow material, needed to be used. In regards to red materials, you look at that, it's increased. The reason why it increased was because, number one, a material called Vicane was used, and that's for going through and controlling termites in buildings. Hopefully you realize with the airport, they leased many buildings, and there were two high-tech buildings that had termites, and it wouldn't be any fun if you saw any wood castings falling from the roof onto your computer table while you were working. And so Mr. Jeff McKee applied for an exemption to go through and use this material, which is a red material, and it was approved. And that's the reason why those numbers are up. The other item that was used at the airport was another material to control rodents on the airway fields, and that is a material called fumitoxin, and that's a red material, and also an exemption was passed in order to use that material as well.
Mr. Escobar, is that when you're talking about the termite control, is it very similar to what, when we see houses tented, what they're using?
That is correct. That's the material that's being used.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. McKee and staff, we would have loved to heat treat it like we try our best when we're going through and heat treating our city facilities, but because of the high-tech equipment, it just wasn't feasibly possible. Mr. McKee did all he could to try to figure out a way not to use Viking, but it just couldn't happen. And here you have the bar chart. Golf Division highlights, units of pesticides applied was 29 in 08, and it jumped to 55 in 09, and that was for controlling fungus on greens. The units of yellow material decreased, however, from 5 to 2.7. The units of red increased from 24 to 52. And once again, this is for controlling funguses on greens, and I do want to let you know that when greens are being sprayed, Mr. Mark Reed and staff, they're out at the golf course at 3 a.m. in the morning, filling their tanks and spraying in the early morning prior to any golfer, prior to anybody coming in contact with the material, because by the time the golfers do come out, the material is dried. 2 newly constructed greens were seeded with disease-resistant bent grass, which is an alternative. Over 455 yards of biosolids were applied throughout the fairways at the golf course, and this was used as an organic fertilizer. And there's our chart. Parks Division. Overall, the pesticides decreased from 78 units applied to 7 in 09. The units of yellow material decreased from 38 to 7. The reason this decreased from such a high number to a lower number was because we did not have to go through and apply any materials to the bird refuges in that period of time. We were able to get environmental services to help out parks and go through and do the application to control mosquitoes. So that's why the number jumped. The majority of that 7 that you see there, units applied, was glyphosate, and also a dormant spray at the Mission Rose Garden in January when the roses are dormant. We also applied over 1,700 yards of mulch to go through and control weeds. We logged in approximately 2 full-time equivalents to doing alternative controls at our parks, and that was a lot of hand weeding, a lot of weed whipping, a lot of using our weed steamer. I don't know if you've seen it. We have a actual steamer that we go through and steam the palm trees along Chase Palm Park and go through and knock down the weeds in regards to that. It's been very effective. And then also, for example, at Alice Keck Park, we have many dry creek beds. We take a propane flamer and we burn the weeds as well. Public Works, their highlights were they increased from 28 units in 08 to 33 in 09. The units of green materials increased from 20 to 32. The units of yellow material decreased from 8 to 1. The material here that you're seeing is, once again, BTI being used by environmental services to control mosquitoes.
Is that the number that we didn't have in our part? Is that when they went to the bird refuge? Okay.
Correct.
No red materials were applied at all?
And no red materials were applied. No infractions like there was last year in the report were applied. We had many meetings within our departments to make sure that would not happen, and that's reflected in the report as well.
drastic reductions.
Correct. So on March 9th, we did meet with our Citizens IPM Advisory Committee, and they voted unanimously to approve the IPM 2009 annual report. And in your packet is also a letter of approval from the committee. And our chair, Mr. Greg Shiddick, did apologize that he wasn't able to make it due to work commitments. On March 17th, the Airport Commission also unanimously voted and approved for the IPM report to come forward to our Parks and Recreation Commission. And also, just so everybody realizes, on April 13th, we'll be going forward to our City Council and giving a report as well. And I know, Bibi, you like seeing slides and such.
Yeah, I
so
like
this
pictures.
is for you. So anyways, these are our IPM strategies, our techniques, and it's, once again, we have a stump grinder going through and grinding stumps, and we do this so we don't have to apply any glyphosate or any other materials in order to go through and get rid of sprouts. We do many hours of weed whipping in our parks. This is Sheffield Park, our reservoir. This here is the entrance to Ledbetter Beach. This was quite extensive going through and doing what we're doing. What you see here on the left is weed fabric. And we decided to take on this project and tackle it. We spent way too many hours weeding in this area here. So we spent approximately 2 weeks doing this particular job. And the reason why it took 2 weeks is because we don't have a dedicated crew that can just go through and continue just to stay on a project. So we would do a little here, a little there, till we finally were able to complete the job. And what you'll see to the bottom of the slide is just a beautiful weed-free landscape.
Great.
Andre Clark Bird Refuge. This is a before and after. This is a difficult place for most folks to realize what's here. When you go all the way to the last dock, when you do the walk at the bird refuge, there is a fence and a gate that does not allow you to enter. However, at times, we do have some transients that will be in this area, illegally camping, and we had to go through on this particular day and remove all this arundo because there were too many encampments in this area, and we worked closely with PD when we were doing this work, and so we've cleaned this up. And we also had received an exemption to go through and use some glyphosate to go through and just keep the Rhododendron down and controlled. So these are some of the things that we do at parks. So at this time, if you have any questions, any further questions, I'm here to answer questions. And I also have before me today our golf course manager, Mr. Mark Reed, and Mr. Jeff McKee from the airport to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you both for coming tonight, and thank you for all the work you do to keep this going. Ms. Wiscombe.
Thank you, Chair Longstreet. A great report. It's really nice to see. I just wanted to ask about the mulch, and I found part of the answer to my question in one of your total mulch use tables here. Huh? Great to see the mulch increased in the amount increase that parks and golf, I guess, are combined, that they used in 09 versus 08. But it's curious, in 07 there was a much bigger amount of mulch used. Is that a budget? Is budgetary reason why it's dropped from the 07 levels then?
Yeah, Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Wiscombe. Yeah, that is definitely correct, and you'll see that number even drop further as we continue to get cut within our budget. However, as you stated regarding volunteerism, we always look forward to volunteers to help, and whenever we do major projects, we do our best to take out loads of mulch, and hopefully our volunteers can help spread it, because it is very time-consuming.
Is that where the cost is? It's in the actual application. It's spreading the material versus.
That's correct. Spreading the
Okay.
material.
Yeah. Well, seems like some.
We had, prior to last year, a dedicated green team that took on these projects. And so there was, I think, was it 2 people or
We had a total of 3 folks that were doing that work.
that just did IPM-related green team work in the parks. So that's gone. So that's why we see that big decline. Mr. Larimore Hall.
Thank you. Great report, as always. And I think the first few years of the program, we did so much to reduce our use of pesticides overall. We'd have a lot. We'd have to, even though we've used more this year. We'd have to, we'd have to maybe try to even get back to where we were before. So, I mean, that's good. But I'm wondering, Santos, you gave several examples of sort of specific problems that we were having with termites or the mosquitoes, et cetera, and that was responsible for the bulk of our increase in use in red materials. But I'm wondering, how has the budget situation affected our use of yellow and red materials? Or is the whole of our increase in the use of red and yellow materials due to those 2 factors of the mosquitoes and the termites, or are we also bumping our use up a bit because of staffing issues or the decrease in hourly employees that we're able to use because of the budget?
Well, in regards to parks, once again, 98% of our park system is green. The other portion is yellow. We always try our best not to apply materials, but because of limited staff, next year you will see an increase in regards to yellow material being used in our yellow parks. Regarding green materials, we're always looking for extra green materials to apply that are effective. We currently haven't really found any weed control with green materials that are effective. That's why we didn't, as parks, didn't use any green materials, because the green materials are very expensive. When you buy a gallon of green material, you're looking at close to $250 per gallon. When you purchase Roundup, Roundup is $100 per gallon. It's a big jump. Regarding the airport, in regards to the amount of materials being used regarding the red material, it is expensive. I don't know the number. If Mr. McKee would like to come and speak on behalf of his department on that item, I'd appreciate it.
Commissioner Longstreet and Commissioners, I'm Jeff McKee, the Environmental Compliance Officer for the airport. I don't think the decision to apply the red or yellow materials was based on budget. The red materials were the Vicane for the termites and then also fumitoxin for rodents on the airfield. And those are the 2 most effective way to control the pest, and actually the best product for that particular situation where there's little potential for exposure and we get a good control of the different pests. The rodents on the airfield we try to keep controlled because they attract predators and they also undermine our safety areas. The attraction of predators can cause the bird strikes or other predator strikes with the aircraft, so we need to keep those controlled. I don't think any of the decisions to use the different tier of materials was based on budget.
Thank you. I just would like to say one thing. We have to get our head around the idea that weeds are plants too, and we're going to get used to them.
I've got just a question, and you can expand on it. I believe last year at the report, I remember thinking there were like 1,300 or 13,000 hours of hand weeding at the airport, and and we're doing it again this year, and it had to do with the extension. Is that for 3 or 4 years, if you want to?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioners, the majority of the hours that we devote to alternative efforts are related to the restoration areas that had to do with our airfield safety project. I believe our commitment there is for 7 years that we'll maintain those areas. I think last year we had over 15,000 hours, so we were down slightly this year, and expect that to continue to tail off as the restoration area takes hold until we do another project and we're required to do something similar.
Other questions of staff? Mr. Burns.
Yeah, just one question, and we may not have an answer for this, but we're always looking for volunteers, and getting people to volunteer to weed is probably the most exciting thing in the world. Has the IPM advisory group come up with any suggestions? Because I know that was something they were hoping to do, and I saw their memo that they're hoping they can find more volunteers. Have you heard anything on that? Thank you.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Burns, in regards to the IPM Advisory Citizens Committee, in regards to volunteerism, that is going to be on the next agenda item that they want to put their heads around and see what we can do in order to help. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to come up with some good solutions. We do have some volunteer dates that are coming up. I will go through and send all the commissioners an email in regards to those dates. But we do have approximately 4 to 5 events that are coming up in the near future. So,
Weeding's therapeutic.
It is very therapeutic.
They don't talk back. Well, any other questions? Another excellent report, and you think back that it was such a difficult issue to get through, and to look at it now, 9 years out, and what's happened and how well the city has done with this. We should really be proud of what the city's adopted and taken on here. So, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work and all the staff and all the departments that make this happen, because it is a commitment to stay on it.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I did just want to mention, for the sake of the newer members of the Commission, there a number of times in Mr. Escobar's report, he talked about the exemptions that were granted by the IPM Advisory Committee. And I think that's been one of the areas where they have both challenged us and partnered with us. And when we talk about exemptions, I think, everybody needs to be reminded these are never slam dunks. These are difficult, being grilled about what options have you tried before you go there. And I just wanted to assure you, even though the program has been in place for 6 years now, they have really worked very well with us and kind of challenged us to take it a little bit further. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful. So I just, a lot of times people don't, if you haven't attended a meeting and sat through one of those sessions, but that's an important role that they play. That was something that was intended when Council set up the IPM Citizen Advisory Committee, and it's a role that continues today. And I did just want to remind you, we do need you to take formal action to accept the report and forward it to City Council.
Then I would entertain a motion.
I move to accept the report and forward it to City Council.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
I just had a comment. I understand the importance of the airport and the safety issues, and I just wanted to say I'm sure that, as Nancy said, there was a lot of thought that went into that, but I appreciate the safety. I just wanted that to be known.
I think we all agree there. Mr. Burns.
Just to throw something out there, at the airport, generally you don't have a lot of children playing on the flight paths, and
you hope,
you hope, and maybe they're chasing coyotes. I don't know, but if we have to look at budget cost, we might look at next year making it slightly easier for work to be done at the airport that getting the exemption. We really don't want to use it if we don't have to, but at the same time, if we're going to prioritize where do we want to be the most safe, obviously at the parks or where we want to be, where there's potential contact with children, than we do at the flight paths, just as a comment. But I'm ready to vote in favor of this report.
Okay. Mr. Casebeer.
Would it be fair to say that in the future, or this year, with the increased rainfall, that we may have greater exposure to mosquitoes and the little varmints grow bigger and multiply more so in years with higher rainfall?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Casebeer. Yes, the wetter year obviously produces more mosquitoes. We have basins at the airport that fill up with primarily fresh water, and in wetter years, the Alticid product that we use lasts for 180 days, and once its effectiveness wears off, we can either treat, if the basins are drying up, we can treat with the green material, the BT material, or if there's a lot of water left there, the BT only lasts for 10 days. We use another extended release application, and that can up to double our application. Also weeds, it's the same situation. We need to keep the weeds down to make sure that the lights and signs are visible for pilots.
Thank you.
And just one other, Mr. Escobar, how is the chanterelle harvest in the park system this season?
Wait a minute.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Casebeer, we'll have to take that one up privately, and I can tell you the secret places where they're at.
Yes, we do not want to discuss that on this dais, do we? Okay, I'm going to call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Okay. I must say I am impressed with the amount of staff reports we have, the great quality tonight. Very good. And we look forward to now our report on the status of fund development efforts and the sponsorship program.
Madam Chair and Commission members, Recreation Manager Judith Cook McCaffrey will give this report. As you know, she has been concentrating on fund development as part of the budget for this year, so we're pleased to give you this update on where we are to date and looking ahead.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. My name is Judith Cook McCaffrey, and I'm a Recreation Manager for the Parks and Recreation Department. And as Nancy mentioned, I'm here to give you an update on the status of my fundraising efforts on behalf of the department and our new sponsorship policy. I wanted to start out tonight by just giving you a little background. A number of years ago, Parks and Recreation Management identified an important need for the department, and that was having a dedicated staff person who spent their time writing grants, soliciting sponsorships, and donations for the department. Numerous parks and recreation departments across the country use this model successfully, but as you know, it's not with the economic climate the way it's been the last few years. It was not possible to fund a new position. So with this year's budget, we restructured our recreation division to allow 50% of my time to be dedicated toward that task. With the Parks and Recreation Community Foundation, or the Park Foundation, as our fiscal sponsor, we're able to apply for grants that are normally available to nonprofit 501c3 organizations. And then we're also, in addition, all donations that are actually made to the Parks and Recreation are tax deductible through the Park Foundation. My presentation wouldn't be complete without a few comments. Especially working with grant writing the last few months, I've observed a few observations currently with grant writing and fund development in our community. As you can imagine, fundraising in our community at this time is very challenging, and many local nonprofits are struggling to fund their programs and services, so competition for grants and sponsorship is extremely fierce. In addition, a number of foundations have suspended their grant-making processes this year, or they've limited their grants to those organizations that they have funded in the past. Also, a number of businesses who typically funded and sponsored a number of events in our community have reduced their giving this year because of the economy, and they themselves are having to reduce their workforce as a result. And those people and those businesses who are interested in corporate sponsorship are really looking closely at the tangible benefits that they'll receive from those sponsorships. I set some goals for this year, and I want to just briefly review some of those. First one was to increase our department visibility in the community to aid our fund development efforts, and that includes increasing our number of press releases on our programs and services. We've typically not tooted our horn enough, and as you're well aware, our Parks and Recreation Department really offers some wonderful programs to some of our neediest community members, and they're worthy of grant funding and sponsorship. One of my additional goals was to research and write at least 15 grants, and to develop a sponsorship policy and increase the community's knowledge of those sponsorship opportunities and donor opportunities through a variety of media. And that's featuring our programs on City TV, being present in family-oriented programs and events in the city with booths that tell about parks and recreation programs. Also featuring our programs on our department blog and in our website, and taking advantage of social media like Facebook to promote our opportunities. This year I'm also working on initiating the development of a donor program with full implementation to occur next year. And that includes setting up the ability for citizens to donate online to parks and recreation programs, and developing a brochure and a strategy for solicitation. And also increasing our revenue by holding some fundraising events. We've identified a number of event possibilities for the future, and actually next month we'll be partnering with the Park Foundation to actually hold our first fundraiser, and I'll be giving you some specifics about that a little later. Here are some of those specific examples I was talking about. This is an example of a slide that's currently featured on Channel 18, advertising our sponsorship opportunities. It's only actually been up for a few weeks, but I've gotten quite a number of calls and interest expressed from community members. Here's an example of our department web page, and actually this specifically is the Concerts in the Park web page, and if you'll notice, I got my little cursor here. We're featuring our presenting sponsor this year is Target on our site. And if you look here on the right column, a person who's interested in corporate sponsorship can click on this little link here, and all the sponsorship opportunities are listed along with the giving levels. And then there's that big button right there that says Give Now. And actually, what's pretty exciting is if you click on that, you'll go directly to our fundraising site that actually just recently has been launched. You can fully customize this site, customize campaigns. This happens to be the Concerts in the Park campaign if you look at it. And on the right you can see our goal for fundraising is $40,000, and we've actually achieved $30,000 of that. You can also recognize your donors. If you see over on the right, there are some of our donors. And it also provides a platform for the donors actually to make an online donation. So let's click on that button and see where we go. And here's where you can make your online donation specifically to Concerts in the Park. You can have your name displayed on the donor wall. You can make the donation in someone else's name. And you can do that with a credit card. You can send a check by mail. Or there's even a feature where you can actually cash in gift cards you haven't used, and that can go toward the donation. Of course, we're also using those social media websites that everybody's busy on and using today. This actually is the Concerts in the Park fan page, and this has been launched for about 3 months now, and we have over 875 fans. And we also have a Park and Recreation Department fan page. It's just been up for a month. And so I encourage anyone out there that's on Facebook to come join us. We post lots of interesting information. If you look there 3 hours ago, or I guess this was 3 hours ago yesterday, I put a link to our department blog where we were just saying that our new activity guide is out and online. And I've also posted all sorts of information about grants and donations received. Anyone who goes here can actually give directly to Concerts in the Park from this page. If you're not signed up to receive our department blog, here's what our department blog looks like. If you look, this is what we sent out yesterday. As I mentioned, it was about our new activity guide that's just been released with all our spring programs and great summer camps for youth. So we invite you to go to our website and check out all those great opportunities we have. And then you see on the right, there the list of all the different topics, blogs that have been posted recently. Recreation staff members provide the information. We try to blog something at least once a week about programs and facility rental or any specials we might have going. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you're not already receiving it. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about our fundraising goals for this year. My goal for this year was $160,000. And despite the economy to date, we've brought in a total of $73,000. We had a goal of $75,000 for grants, and currently we're at 67%. I'm anticipating at this point that we're going to exceed that goal, as I do have 3 grants currently pending and a number of them that are still due before the end of the year. Sponsorships, our goal was $75,000. We're currently at 20% of that, or $15,000. We did set that goal of $75,000, and we may not reach that goal this year. However, by the end of the fiscal year, we'll be actively out in the community with our program in place, and I see that number, coming up significantly. Lastly, our donations, we're actually at 75% of our goal, which is great, with our Park Foundation fundraiser coming up, and now our new opportunity of being able to make donations online. I see that exceeding the goal as well this year. And just as a final status, so far this year we've submitted 9 grants. We've received 6 of those. We're awarded 6. We have 3 grants, 2 letters of inquiry, and 3 sponsorship requests pending at this point. Now I want to talk specifically about the sponsorship program and policy, and each got a copy of that. We are sharing this draft policy with the Commission for your information this evening and your comments before it's presented to City Council. As you know, the general fund is shrinking, and the goal of this policy is to seek alternative revenue streams so we can maintain and enhance our programs, our services, and our facilities beyond that core funding that we receive from the general fund. I think it's important to acknowledge the difference between a sponsorship and a donation, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Sponsorships are either cash or donations of in-kind services, such as media, radio advertising, print advertising, or maybe printing services would be good examples of in-kind donations. The recipient of a sponsorship, which would be the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department, is obliged to return something of value to the sponsor. And the value is typically public recognition, highlighting the contribution of the sponsor. On the other hand, you have a donation or a gift, and that comes with no restrictions on how the money or resources are used, unless it's specified by the donor. No benefits other than official acknowledgement, and actually very grateful acknowledgement for the donation is provided. The benefits of each sponsorship are customized for each individual sponsorship based on the value of the sponsorship and the program or the asset that's being sponsored. And of course, a corporate sponsorship is typically consummated by an agreement that details the specifics of the exchange, and that is a document we're currently working on finalizing. I wanted to I'm not going to go over this entire thing, but I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of the sample level of sponsorship benefits. And I'm sure you've all seen this type of levels for various events and things in the community. Typically, there are the lowest level sponsorships, mid-level, and a high level, say in a presenting sponsor. Some examples of the lowest level of sponsorship might include inclusion of a company's logo on a sponsor banner, or the sponsorships mention in media releases or recognition at the program or event. A mid-level sponsorship would also include those, but would include things like a corporate logo included on our department website or a publication, acknowledgement during public announcements made at a sponsored event like the concerts in the park, or perhaps recognition at a Park and Recreation Commission meeting. Highest level of sponsorship would include all those things I've mentioned, and possibly visibility in parks or facilities with approved signage, reserved seating or complimentary tickets to a sponsored event, or a link to a corporate website from the department and program website. We've set up our sponsorship program actually in 2 phases. And the first phase of the sponsorship program is being implemented now. And that's the phase of program sponsorship. And I just wanted to highlight a few of those programs for the public's benefit and for our new commissioners to tell you about some of those great programs we have. The first program is Summer Fun. This is a drop-in summer program that provides a summer camp experience for more than 600 of our neediest youth in our community during the summer months. And our fundraiser in April will be benefiting this program. And we're also looking for some corporate sponsors to help us provide this great opportunity for these needy youth. Many of you are familiar with our Concerts in the Park program, and those are free musical concerts offered in Chase Palm Park during the summer. Typically more than 40,000 attendees at these concerts. Then we have our Teen Leadership Banquet, and this is an annual celebration honoring the significant achievements of teen leaders in our community. And more than 20 organizations come together to nominate deserving youth in our community. And we're currently looking for a presenting sponsor for that event. That would actually be a sponsorship of $2,000. And won't someone come forward and help us offer that great event this year? We also have our Fun on the Run mobile van. If you see the picture there on the bottom left. We've actually received some very generous grants for this program, so it's going to be rolling into the east side and west side neighborhoods this next month, providing recreation programs right in the neighborhoods to kids that are there after school looking for something to do. We also have some sponsorship opportunities available for that program. We're also looking for a sponsor to operate the Oak Park wading pool. We had some great news this month because we received a $25,000 grant to make all the necessary repairs and upgrades to Oak Park Pool. These are wading pool. These are the repairs and upgrades that were needed last summer that kept the pool closed. And we're really jumping ahead of the game here, anticipating some of those significant budget cuts and realizing that the operation of the pool could potentially be one of those cuts. With a $10,000 sponsorship, we can keep this wading pool open, and that serves almost 7,500 young children and their families every summer. So that's a great opportunity. And lastly, we have the Children's Fiesta Parade, a big favorite during Old Spanish Days. Parks and Recreation puts on that program, and we serve about 2,500 youth. It's a great opportunity for businesses to involve their employees and their families in a sponsorship. So we'd love to hear from you if you're interested or would like some more information. The second phase of our sponsorship program includes the sponsorship of sites and vehicles. And specifically, we've identified some possible sites and vehicles for sponsorship. We have 3 community gardens. We have 18 playgrounds, 8 sports fields. We have a really nice Ortega swimming pool that provides swimming lessons and free recreational swim for youth in our community. We have 6 recreation vans. You see many of the youth organizations in town have their vans sponsored. And we have our recreation bus that's taking youth in our community to all sorts of activities during the summer and during the school year. We won't be implementing this phase of our program until next year. It will involve City Council approval and approval from the sign committee after we develop a sign plan for these sites. We do see some real potential here for sponsorship opportunities with the goal that any signage that we proposed would not negatively affect the aesthetics of our parks or sites or the visitors' experiences to those areas. Our goals for FY11 are ambitious. They're greatly increased over this year. In next year, our sponsorship program will be fully implemented. I will have identified more grant opportunities and more grants to apply for. We'll be holding a department fundraising event, and phase 2 of our sponsorship program will have been implemented. I do want to highlight our fundraiser that's coming up in April. We're calling it Safe Summer for Kids. It's sponsored by the Park Foundation, and we'd like to invite the public to join us for a really great sunset cruise aboard the Condor Express, all for a great cause. The monies realized for this event will benefit our Summer Fun Drop-In program. So mark this on your calendars, Friday, April 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30. I've included a number there for the Park Foundation for information, 280-9799, or you can contact the Recreation Department. We hope to see you there. If you're unable to make this event and would love to make a donation, we'd really like to hear from you. Should be a great time. My presentation tonight wouldn't be complete without recognizing and thanking our current sponsors and funders, and so I just wanted to run through a few of them. Target and K-Lite, Santa Barbara Beautiful, the Wood Claysons Foundation, the Tobes Foundation, the Santa Barbara Foundation, Santa Barbara Independent, Santa Barbara Sunrise Rotary Club, the Fund for Santa Barbara, the Venico Foundation, and SantaBarbaraParent.com. I'd like to invite any member of the public who would like some more information on corporate sponsorship opportunities or information on making a donation to support Parks and Recreation programs to give me a call. Judith McCaffrey at 897-1946. You can also go to our website or contact me through the Parks and Recreation office, but I'd love to talk with you. That finishes my presentation this evening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for a great report, and I am really impressed at what you have gotten off the ground in the last few months. This is, it's exceptional, and it's a lot of hard work. I think several of us up here are fundraisers in our other life or are tasked with some of that and know what kind of an effort this takes. And the organization you have here, the materials that you presented us today, the sponsorship guidelines, all of that, very impressive. So thank you very much. Questions?
Also have a question. Naming opportunities. I don't know if somebody could name one of our parks or whatever, but naming opportunities are always nice, as well as sponsorships. Have you looked at that?
Chair Longstreet and commissioners, it's very important that we move very slowly with sponsorship, which is why you see such a well thought out, detailed policy. The city of Santa Barbara has been very conservative in sponsors, the use of sponsors, the recognition of sponsors in public spaces. The naming of buildings is very specifically addressed in the municipal code, requires specific criteria and approval by the city council. And so that's one aspect. And I think the other aspect for us is because we've all had some past experiences and working other places, and if you're not careful you can really detract from your agency if you go too far with your sponsor opportunities. So we've met with city administration and talked about, there are a lot of concerns. We're the first department to put forward a policy and to move forward in an aggressive manner. And it's very important that everybody have confidence in our ability to manage the program so people don't feel like their city is for sale. And there's been, some concerns expressed about that. So I think approaching it in the way that we are helps to ensure that that doesn't happen, which is one of the reasons why we really wanted to share the draft policy with you. And I'm guessing that some of you may have some of those same concerns as well.
Yes, I just wanted clarification on, I know there's probably quite a bit written that you have to adhere to, but I just wasn't totally clear on it. And maybe we could have that discussion offline at some
Well,
point.
remember when we were naming Casa Las Palmas? That was a tough one.
That was a tough one.
But it couldn't be a name, and it couldn't be. There were several prominent people that it came up at that point. Might have been appropriate to name it for, but that was off the table to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I asked.
And not to say that it's completely off the table. Many of our city parks are named after either the individual or the family who donated the land to the city. And so there may be opportunities. It just is one of those very rare actions that is taken and extremely well thought out. So
I just wanted to say also that the plan is very well thought out and very nicely laid out.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, just as a point of clarification, the site sponsorship that I referred to does not include naming the facility. What it would include is a signage that is put up that identifies the company as the sponsor, and then it's up and in place for a limited time, basically the limit or the time of the sponsorship.
Yeah, I didn't think that was happening, but I was just asking if you had looked into it or if there had been any.
Yeah, good question.
Interest. Thank you.
I would wonder if someone came at us with several $1 million, we couldn't start a negotiation.
I have some great ideas that we could just work on that.
So do I.
This was just a great report. It's really an exciting time. I just think it's wonderful. And my only comment is I agree with you totally. You have not tooted your horn enough on this, and I hope that there'll be some sort of flyer available for sponsorships that people can, when they walk into the parks office, they see it there and say, oh, well, this so-and-so might be interested in this or whatever, as well as the website, which is just superb. I think it's great. Thank you.
Burns.
Well, I generally would just say ditto, but I'm just actually amazed that we're doing it so well. I hope we don't say, well, that's good, and not do as much as we possibly can with the budget where we are. If we take 3 or 4 years to put everything together, we may not have very many employees or parks left to worry about. But I do agree that we want to be very cautious, but it doesn't mean we have to be very, let's do it quickly, but in a cautious manner. But I am very impressed with what you've done, considering that we really started with very little 8 or 9 months ago. So thank you very much, Judith.
I would echo that. I just, we do need to be careful and proceed slowly, but especially where our kids' programs are involved. I would, so a banner goes up, and I'm happy with a banner if the pool is open. And so I would hope, as other boards and commissions review certain aspects of this, there will be consideration given to the outcomes. And the outcomes are very important to our whole community, and especially in many cases the kids in our community and the kids that wouldn't have an opportunity if it wasn't subsidized in some way or another. So those, those are, I think, near and dear to all of our hearts, those programs. So thank you for that. And really, everybody come on the Condor. It's going to be fun. It's Join Park. Other comments, questions? Well, thank you, Judith, so much, and good job. Excellent. Okay, but do we have anything? We just have our budget meetings coming out. We have Parks and Recreation budget.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I thought I would just let you know, in our last discussion, we kind of talked about the different meetings that the Commission wanted to have moving through the budget process, and nothing has really changed from what we discussed before. I did want to let you know that I have been, because the Commission expressed a desire to have more involvement from the community center advisory committees and the youth council earlier on in the process. So I have been in the process of doing briefings in a fairly general sense, but kind of this is what you should expect to see, and this will be the process. So I have met with the Lower West Side Advisory Committee. I've met with the Franklin Center Advisory Committee. I will be meeting not next week, but the following week with the Youth Council and the West Side Advisory Committee. And my message in all of those instances is to encourage them to, if they can't be here, to watch the budget presentation at your April meeting, so they get a full breadth of what the impacts will be to Parks and Recreation and the strategy behind different reductions, and then I have asked them at a minimum to at least have one or two of their advisory committee members there to provide, feedback and input to the Commission. So the response has been very great so far. People are very anxious to learn more and to be involved in what the priorities should be going forward. And everybody understands that this has the potential to be a very difficult budget process. And we are still hoping that there will be concessions by the labor unions, which will reduce the impact of public services. And we won't know what that will look like for some time, but that is our hope. So we're hoping it's not the worst case scenario. And that's really where we are with budget right now, although I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I think we have our meetings coming up. And Neighborhood and Outreach Services
I apologize. Recreation Manager Sarah Hanna emailed me the information, and I was going to share it with you, and I forgot to print it out and bring it with me. So we will send that out in an email to the Commission in the morning, so that you have an update on all the work that is taking place in Neighborhood and Outreach Services.
Okay, thank you. And just this month, we did receive a resignation from one of our commissioners. Daniel Hockman resigned. And just tonight, before we adjourn, I'd just like to thank him for his service, both on the Parks and Recreation Commission and his previous service with Creeks, which I know was so near and dear to his heart. And we wish Daniel the best. So, with that, is there anything further? Then we shall entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in